My name's Gail, 32 years old. I am a nurse practitioner in a clinic of the city of Omaha. I'm a single mother of a 7-year-old son, Alex. For 7 years, ever since Alex was born, I had not had a single good night's sleep. It's always the nightmare that I encountered every single night. The nightmare that brought me back to the horrifying accident 7 years ago. The cargo truck, flashing its high beams, coming right at me. The speed of the collision was truly out of this world. The concussive forced me in and out of consciousness, constantly shifted between crimson red of adrenaline surge and blackened tunnel vision. I'm slowly losing my grip on reality before the last minutes, throwing a glance at my husband before everything turned black. I was lucky to be alive. However, my husband wasn't. The day my husband finally passed away would also be the day my poor son Alex was born. It's like fate had cruelly made him an orphan before he was even born. Alex was a spitting image of his father. He's nimble, quick on his feet, and incredibly clever. However, raising Alex wasn't an easy task for me. He, as you can say it, was rather strange. You see, in his room was the miniatures of the creatures that I'd say wasn't very pretty or downright child-friendly at any bit. He constantly lived in his own world where there's monsters and demons, with the protagonist came to the rescue of such world. At one night when I was asleep, I suddenly felt a nightmare pounding hard upon my chest, smothering me. Jolted awake by a sudden huge shadow, I let out a loud scream. However, after settling down, I realized my son Alex, who told me he's just seen a demon. I hugged him tightly to console my son. After around 20 minutes, the drowsiness came to him and he fell asleep. Looking at my son's face, I thought of his father, my late husband, and couldn't contain my tears anymore. I wish he was still here, with Alex, with me, where I wouldn't be that alone in this world. The next morning, Alex was nowhere in sight. I came downstairs, making breakfast as usual, before calling him down. After a while, Alex appeared up the stairs, his hand holding a twisted wooden toy. That'd be the demon slayer he'd just spent time making, surely about its effect upon the demons. "I will save you from the demons, Mom." His words meant the world to me, no matter how silly it sounded. Around noon, when I was working in the clinic, I received a call from Alex's school. The headmistress and homeroom teacher was there at the office, waiting for me. The homeroom teacher told me that Alex was a notoriously rebellious student. With the new weapon he carried might endanger the other students. The stories Alex told his classmates would made the class not able to feel safe around him. Even worse, this morning, Alex physically assaulted one of the female students in his PE class. As if the job and sleepless nights weren't bad enough, now this was the one that truly broke my camel's back. I excused myself from work and school, taking Alex home early with me. On the way home, Alex refused every question I threw at him, answering it with utter silence. I tried my best not to get mad, yet I believed it did show to the boy. "She said I'm a fatherless spine," Alex finally spilled out, lowered his voice as if he's saying things that weren't supposed to be said. I bursted my tears out at the saying of my boy, hugging him tightly. That night, I managed to cook the dishes he liked the most. Hopefully it'd make him feel better. That's it. I'll change his school so that he'll have a better academic environment. That night, I went over to his room for a sleepover. Looking at his bookshelf, it's a surprise that I realized it's now full of books. It's been a while since the last time I cleaned out his room. So as a treat, I told him to pick one so I could read him a bedtime story. Alex, after attentively looking at his collection, brought out a red cover one with the title, "The Joker's Pranks." Alex leaned his head over my lap, eagerly waiting for his long-time coming bedtime story, read by his mom. There was once a joker, always funny, loved to joke around with his usual laughter. His hobby was to hide from the shadow, making pranks to laugh at everyone around him. At first, the details were rather mild, and I loved watching my son attentively listening to the story he liked. But the more I dug into it, the more and more violent and creepy the details became. So I decided to end the story there for another book. Alex at first threw a tantrum in protest, yet against my stern expression, he could only frown. The next morning, I spent time reading about the Joker's book. The Joker will always be there behind you. He'll show you the hints, pranks you along the way. He will eventually possess your body and soul, passing on with the Joker's spirit. Okay, now that was enough, I thought to myself before I put the book away. Hid it somewhere completely out of Alex's reach. A few days later, when I was just about to sleep, Alex slammed on my door, barging in. Mom, I just saw that Joker in my room," he said. Okay, now what? I brought my son closer so he could calm himself down. Alex then proceeded to describe the Joker, exactly like the one in that creepy book, even though I was sure he'd never read that at all. Okay, that's enough nonsense for tonight, Alex. Mommy wants you to return to your room and sleep. Alex was angry that I didn't believe him, yet he still followed my order and returned to his room, though not without any discomfort. I was not able to sleep again that night. Later the following morning, I prepped up his favorite pumpkin soup for breakfast. He was still angry at me, yet not showing it fully. During breakfast, Alex told me about his friend's birthday party this evening and would like me to go there with him. Of course, I agreed with him and assured him that I would arrange my work to go with him. After breakfast, I discovered many small glass shards in my soup. It was scary. I almost inhaled it. So I told Alex to stop, that I could check on his bowl whether there was any glass shards. Fortunately, there wasn't any. But at that very moment, I'm starting to wonder whether it was one of Alex's creepy pranks. I didn't do it, Mom. It must be the Joker's prank. He'll show you the hints, pranks you along the way. Alex, reminding me of the crazy Joker story. It was crazy, so I lost my cool and did yell at him. He bursted out crying and ran back to his room. I cleaned up the breakfast in frustration. How could my own son do this to me? Within my mouth was a small glass shard. I spat it out and could clearly feel the metallic stench of my blood. I returned to my room, trying to rest for a bit to make up for the previous sleepless night. On the nightstand was a picture of me and my husband, taken when I was still carrying Alex with my tummy. In the picture, however, my husband was redrawn into a Joker, making me feel that I am hugging such a miserable creature. Finally, at the boiling point, I carried the picture into Alex's room, questioning the boy. He insisted to never do such a thing, leaving me frustrated. Exhaustion combining with constant sleep deprivation left me in a very bad mood. So all I could do would be to sit in my room, thinking about everything that's happening. Suddenly, Alex yelped aloud, snapped me back from the thought flow. I could hear him sobbing and shaking very bad, though I couldn't see him anywhere in his room. It turned out he's hiding under his bed, constantly talking about closing all the doors and windows, barring the Joker from entering the home. I ran back to my room in a furious state, tore the book about the Joker into pieces, threw them all into the trash can. Later that night, the two of us dressed ourselves up for the birthday party. On our way there, I told him to stop mentioning everything about the Joker from here on out. He agreed. At the party, Alex joyfully went over playing with his friends while the mothers gathered around the living room, chatting. Emily's mom, the party holder, told us that there would be a clown hired to bring gifts for the children at the end of the party as part of the surprise. I'm feeling unwell at the mention about the clown. Right next to the children was a man dressed up in a clown outfit. That must be the surprise Emily's mom mentioned about. In just a few seconds, when I glanced back to the children, the man in the clown outfit was no longer there. but instead a horrible monster with bloodied fangs and claws trying to devour the children. Instinctively, I came charging at the creature with everything I could hold on to, bashing its head with the glass of wine I happened to come across. A loud yell rang in the air and I snapped myself from the bloodthirst. I was attacking a party guest instead. Needless to say, Alex and I was ordered out of the party. On our way home, Alex only stared at me with his innocent eyes, not knowing why I was acting out like that. He looked up to me to be his role model, and yet I failed him. I couldn't stop crying. Back home, Alex went upstairs without saying any word. Later, he came downstairs telling me that there's the Joker laughing at him on his bed. I was too tired to say anything else. Everything around me swung wildly into a frenzy whirlwind. I yelled aloud, trying to let out all the frustration I had been keeping all along. Getting myself together, I dragged my exhausted feet toward the kitchen table. When I managed to open up the drawer, I could clearly see Alex within it, chopped into pieces. I yelped aloud, only to see my other hand holding the bloodied knife still warm from all the flowing crimson red liquid. I fell to the ground, and suddenly it turned out to be just another livid nightmare I was facing. I need to find my son quickly to make sure he's well, okay, and unharmed. The next morning I'd clean up the house and burn that Joker's book away. Take Alex for a joyride, booking a flight back to my old home in Minneapolis with his grandparents. Then the boy will be free from all those monsters and demons and jokers haunting us too. I'll have Alex staying there with my grandparents. He would have a beautiful childhood, surrounded by all the lovely relatives and friends. I would return to Omaha, continuing my work as well as undergoing the psychiatric treatment at the hospital. There was no Joker at all. It's all in my head, manifest from the pain and exhaustion. It can't rain every day. It won't rain forever. The sunshine might be gone, but it will shine again after my life's been better, and we'll be back together. I'm Baron, 22 years old. I'm studying in Yale University, New Haven, majoring in English literature. To be fair, I wasn't a fan of literature, yet I'd managed to drag myself to the last semester of the university. For my graduation thesis, I chose horror short story genre. I'm sure many of you here are familiar with ChatGPT. It was a lifesaver for me on every damn test, a miracle like the second coming of Jesus. This graduation thesis of mine was not an exception. I was super confident with ChatGPT as my sidekick, so I spent very little time researching for the final thesis. All the time supposed to work on the project I spent on my new girlfriend Alice's vacation by the seaside. Even after returning from the endless holidays, I spent time partying from dusk to dawn as well. It wasn't until there was 3 days left that I began diving into the graduation project. I woke up around 11 p.m. on that day, followed by a nasty hangover. Groggily, I turned on the laptop. I ran ChatGPT on the background with voice recognition software. Write me your best horror story, I demanded the artificial intelligence. Suddenly came a creepy laughter that jolted me fully awake. A graduating student night horror story. Damn. Turned out the laughter was all part of the atmosphere. ChatGPT had came a long way, I thought. There was a student named Baron who stayed awake until 11 p.m. to finish on his graduation thesis. People might think he's a hard-working student, but turns out he's marathoning for his laziness. Once again, the laughter echoed from the ChatGPT program. I got a feeling that it was writing about myself. Kinda creepy, but interesting enough to continue further, I thought, watching at the running texts. When he was grinding down on his work for the thesis, Baron felt there was some tingling in the air around him, as if he's being watched. Baron felt a sudden dread prompting him to look around to make sure everything was all right. But then he shrugged, thinking that he's just in a lot of thoughts, and continued his studies. A while later, there came some sudden knocks on his door. Baron threw his gaze at the door. Who could have come in this late hour? He wondered. The knocking came more and more intense, uneased him. Baron came toward the door, one hand on the doorknob, one eye over the peephole. It was clear that there wasn't anyone outside. The knocking was still there. Baron took a deep breath to calm his racing heart. He decisively opened the door in one fell swoop. Outside was the calm, quiet dormitory's hallway, and the knocking suddenly stopped on its own. It struck a nerve. Baron carefully observed the empty hallway before closing the door and returning to his workstation. Back to his desk, it took him some time before he was able to go back to work. Though there were many things happening, his first priority now was the thesis. Weirdly, Baron's laptop turned the ChatGPT all on its own, even though he wasn't planned to open it. There was some weird text appearing there with only one continuous line of ha 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 ha, together with some creepy laughter. Baron was scared. He tried to turn off the application, but everything wasn't seeming to work. The laughter was louder and louder until he couldn't take it anymore, covering his eyes and ears. And when he reopened his eyes, all Baron could see was his own body twisted and turned over a pool of blood, as if every single bone had been smashed in his body. He yelped aloud, fell down on his back. Together, many objects in his room had been smashed too. The coffee mug was among them. "Superbly done, ChatGPT," I muttered, paused on the text generation. All came to a great start. I started writing down the story into my graduation thesis. As soon as I was typing to the part of the knocking on the door, there was indeed a knocking on the door. My first reaction was to stare down on my laptop. It could be the app's doing. But when I opened the application, everything was normal. No sound coming from there. So there was indeed a knocking on the door, and not something out of the laptop. "Who's there?" I yelled out to the door. Nobody responded, though the knocking kept on going. Curious, I came closer and closer to the door. Eyes squinted through the peephole. Weird. There wasn't anyone around, yet the knocking continued. I immediately opened the door and jumped outside. Nobody's there. It was unworldly, similar to the story I had just read. That startled me, so I quickly returned to my work desk and locked the door tight. I tried to remember the other part of the story, which now began taking root and rather scary. So I turned off ChatGPT and continued with my work. However, I couldn't concentrate much. I was on edge, waiting nervously for the next part with the scary laughter. For 10 minutes there wasn't anything else. I thought to myself it was all my imagination and overthinking, and decided to continue my work. I opened ChatGPT to continue with the thesis. The moment the screen came up, it was me in there, twisted and turned on a pool of blood, as if all the bones had been forcefully extracted from within. The image startled me and I fell backward from my seat. My knees hit hard on the desk, prompting the coffee mug to fall down, breaking into pieces. The hot coffee popped hard and burned my leg. Okay, it wasn't a dream anymore. Okay. Everything did feel outworldly strange now. I quickly grabbed my phone to call my friend staying downstairs. Suddenly, the creepy laughter echoed from the ChatGPT program. "What do you think about the previous session? Do you wish to continue?" I stopped right there, frozen in my desk. A bitter lump rose upon my throat. The fucking apps acted like it knew everything I was doing now. It's as if something sinister was there, trying to get to my nerve. Even though I did not say anything, the application acted as if it had received the command and continued writing. Baron was scared. Everything around him felt weirdly scary. He stared down onto the display without acknowledging a mysterious character in the same room, staring into him reading the horror story. Another laughter came, this time accompanied by a creepy tune with it. I jumped into the laptop to close down the screen. The moment I finished doing it, far in the corner of my eyes, over the dark side of the room, I saw a black shadow attentively staring into me. I'm Leon, living in New York. I am very lucky to have a happy family. My parents have been together for more than 20 years. My brother, Jason, is 10 years older than me. He also has a small, happy family with his wife and daughter. That day was my parents' silver wedding anniversary. The whole family held a cozy party and took a commemorative photo together. My mother wore an old wedding dress. She was really beautiful at the age of 48. My father was also stylish in a white shirt. Parents said sweet words to each other. They thanked each other for their 25 years of companionship. My brother got his camera ready. My niece, Fiona, enjoys running around. My brother looked at Fiona happily and took a few pictures of her. When the whole family arranged a position to take photos, Fiona suddenly started crying and was not cooperating. Fiona is almost 2 years old this year. She walks quite well but is slow to speak. She cried and then reached towards my mother as if she wanted my mother to hold her. When she sat on my mother's lap, she immediately became happy again. The whole family laughed because of Fiona's cuteness. Everyone looked at the camera and smiled brightly. After taking photos, everyone continued the party and danced together. More than a week after, my brother took the photos to be developed. After dinner, everyone brought out the photos to look at. I was startled when I held the photos in my hand. In the photos my brother took of Fiona, she was chasing a boy. The photo doesn't show his face clearly. Looking at his height, I guess the boy is about 3 years old. I quickly picked up the other photos to look at. In the family photo, that boy appeared again. That boy stood next to my mother, playing with Fiona. So she cried for my mother because she wanted to continue playing with that boy. I was startled again. In all the photos, I was not there. But the strange thing is that my parents did not have any questions or panic reactions when looking at the photos. They smiled and complimented my brother for taking beautiful photos. They didn't even see the other boy like me. Suddenly, my mother was thoughtful and then burst into tears. "I wish there were more Leon and Marcus in the family photo," my mother said with a choked voice. "Leon and Marcus? I'm Leon. I'm here, right? And who is Marcus? Are there any other family members that I don't know about?" The family atmosphere fell silent. No one paid attention to my questions, except for Fiona, who ran to hug me as if to comfort me. I hugged Fiona, but a series of questions appeared in my mind. Looking closely at the family photo, that boy's face is very familiar. Another evening, I was in the bedroom with Fiona, who was very attached to me. We will play together for a while before the baby falls asleep. I stayed and watched Fiona for a while before returning to my room. But that day when I walked out the door, Fiona suddenly woke up. The little girl whined and asked me to stay. I quickly hugged Fiona to comfort her, and in just a moment she smiled. Fiona looked at me intently and she said, "Friend." When my sister-in-law heard Fiona crying, she also ran over worriedly. As soon as she entered, she witnessed Fiona's first words. My sister-in-law happily picked up the baby and ran to the room to show it to my brother. The happy laughter of the small family also made me laugh unconsciously. One beautiful morning, my parents wore black clothes and looked sad. My parents told me and my brother's family that they wanted to take us to visit some people. I was quite curious but didn't ask much, but did what my parents said. My family stopped the car in front of the gate of a large cemetery. I went last, following the whole family into the cemetery. My mother sadly knelt and cried at a grave. My father and brother tried to comfort her. Coming closer to look at the tombstone, I was shocked to see that the names printed on the tombstone were Marcus and Leon. Looking at the two small photos on the stele, I was startled to recognize the boy in the family photo. It turned out that boy's name was Marcus. The other photo is me, Leon. That boy and I only have different eye colors. Everything before my eyes gradually blurred. Echoing in my ears were the sounds of police cars and ambulances, followed by the sound of crying, the sound of my parents calling out Leon and Marcus's names in pain and helplessness. Before my eyes appeared the scene of the bodies of two twin boys covered in blood and open wounds. The two boys lay on top of each other in a pool of blood. A man holding a sharp knife stood looking at the bodies of two boys with wide eyes full of red veins. The tight pain throughout my body pulled me back to the present. My body was covered in scars. They began to bleed and hurt. My mother was still kneeling and crying next to the grave. Fiona walked up, pointed to the picture of me and Marcus on the grave and said, "You." I'm Egan, 45 years old. I'm the chief of police at the Westchester Police Department, Pennsylvania, USA. I love my job and have many certificates and medals for my contributions in the profession. At the end of 2023, my teammates and I successfully solved the case of a drug production and trafficking ring in the city. The leader of that ring is Dominic. He is like a ferocious and cunning stray dog. To successfully solve that case, I lost my little finger while confronting Dominic. He was sentenced to life in prison and is being held at Chester Prison. Nothing would happen until earlier this year. Dominic escaped from prison. Dominic's arrest warrant was immediately issued throughout Chester County and other counties in Pennsylvania and neighboring states. After many days of searching and investigating, Dominic was still missing. At around 10 o'clock last night, the police department received a call from a resident reporting that Dominic was seen hiding at a nearby abandoned hospital. My teammates and I immediately set out. According to the displayed location, that abandoned hospital is Pennhurst, located in Spring City. The hospital is used to treat people with mental illness and disabilities. It has been closed since 1987. Police cars arrived at the hospital at nearly 11 a.m. We sealed off the entire area outside the hospital. After that, I and 3 other policemen will be responsible for searching for Dominic inside. When we entered the hospital lobby, we looked around and then split up in different directions to look for Dominic. I held the gun and flashlight tightly and gradually entered the treatment area for mental patients. Even though I've been through a lot of cases, but searching for a dangerous criminal in an abandoned hospital scene at midnight still keeps me on edge. I cautiously observed my surroundings, mentally ready because Dominic could attack at any time. Shining my flashlight into every corner, the cold feeling increased as I went deeper into the hospital. I was about to leave when I looked closely at a hospital room and saw nothing. Suddenly, a breeze blew past my ears, as if someone had run past me. I immediately turned around, one hand holding the gun, the other shining a flashlight, but there was no one. Slowly I turned around and continued walking, but I was always alert to both sides and behind me. When I got to a larger hospital room, I saw some personal belongings, clothes, and leftover food boxes. Everything has just been used, as the food still shows no signs of spoilage. I confirmed over the radio with all my teammates inside and outside the hospital. There are people living in this abandoned hospital. It is highly likely that it is Dominic. Quickly, search and arrest. As I finished speaking, crazy laughter rang out outside the hospital hallway. The laughter was very loud and echoed in the dark and cold space. I quickly ran out into the hallway, holding my gun firmly and ready to pull the trigger at any moment. But strangely, there was no one there. Maybe he can turn invisible or evaporate, I thought to myself. The horror happened again. Behind me, in front of my eyes, on both sides of me, There appeared a lot of uncontrolled laughter, screams, fast-running footsteps, and the sound of wheels. It was like someone was pushing stretchers through the hallways. I was motionless for a moment, trying to reshape everything. I've heard many rumors about the horror of this hospital. What I could do at that moment was stay calm and continue looking for Dominic. As soon as I turned around, I shined my flashlight into a room on the right and was about to enter. Standing close in front of me was a strange woman. Eyes wide open, mouth wide open, neck twisted to one side. I was startled and screamed loudly, immediately stepped back and dropped the flashlight. It took a few seconds for me to calm down, pick up the flashlight and look into the room. That girl has disappeared. Suddenly, a man's panicked scream rang out loudly. "Don't come near me, bitch, I'll kill you!" The screams were menacing but full of fear. I'm sure it's Dominic's voice. I ran quickly into the hallway to locate the scream and began searching. Dominic's screams became clearer and closer each time, but there began to be weakness and despair. I ran into room 1313. The first thing I felt was the smell of blood. Looking around with the flashlight, I was startled to see Dominic's body on an old hospital bed with 2 broken legs. His body was still hot, his hand clutching a sharp knife stabbed deep into his chest. Blood continued to flow from the wound. Next to the hospital bed, there are still some medical equipment from ancient times. On the bed is a wristband with the words Lanny written on it. Could this be the name of the patient in this room? Could this be the girl I saw earlier? 3 of my teammates also ran over and were shocked to witness the scene before their eyes. Dominic's body was examined and determined to have died by suicide. There were no signs of any attack, so the case is over. But my 3 teammates and I still don't believe that Dominic committed suicide. Could it be that Dominic did something to make the soul of a woman named Lanny angry?